Everyone, thank you for joining the Energy Buyers Brief. Excited to talk about some energy market elements here. Quick logistics, this is a live stream, so please use the chat feature, interact with us, that we have all the other colleagues who will be looking in on that. If you need something to talk about to start, give us your name, your state, your time zone, or your top 5 reasons why the Spurs are going to beat the Thunder in 6. Up to you. My name is Ben Walker. I'm the Vice President of Market Analytics here, which means I look at pricing trends, regulatory events, and most importantly, energy fundamentals in the electricity markets and natural gas markets across the U.S. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Bill Townsend, Environ's CRO. He's been in the industry for 30-ish years, spending time at places like Platts and Genscape. And he oversees our sales and marketing efforts. And I believe, Bill, earlier in your career, you were in the basement of the EIA preparing some of the data.
Yes, that was where I started out, down in the basement of the Forrestal building, working on annual energy outlook. So, which I think we're talking about at some point today.
Actually, yeah. So let's bring that up. So the annual energy outlook is something the EIA puts out every year. The most recent one last month in April, and it has a variety of information in it, which is useful. For today's context, we're looking at electricity load growth forecasts. And if you go and look at the actual EIA data or the actual report, they chop the historic trend in around 2020 or so. I threw on the historic going back to 1980 to show, we had this upward trend and then we had this flattening for about 20 years. And then it looks like we're all up and to the right, Bill. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, trying to keep a perspective of our customers and energy buyers, energy consumers, and it's pretty crazy, the growth rate that we're expected to see continue into the future. From that standpoint, I'm like, I don't see anything but higher prices, right? I mean, looks like a very demand-driven kind of situation, and this is, I guess, when I ask you about like why and is this all AI and data centers? Like, tell me, like, why are we living in this world?
Yeah, I mean, it really is an interesting, to see the EIA puts together these different scenarios, right? High economic growth, low economic growth, high oil price, high oil availability, and yet all of those scenarios are up and up and up. It really is, AI is the primary driver. Sorry, I should say data centers, which are AI, some crypto mining, even some co-locations. But we are seeing a lot of that kind of lead the growth. We are also seeing some of it from electrification and electric vehicles, but that's really, it's either fallen off or it's really pushing up, kind of the 2040 plus time frame. Anything that's in the next 10-ish years really is just kind of coming from that data center side, which seems likely, right? We're definitely looking at that to be a likely thing, but we're also on the flip side, the talk of this AI bubble certainly is a situation. What are your thoughts on, is this real? Are these projections going to happen?
I have the same question in my mind, and I was thinking about two things in recent news. One is some of the AI backlash you're seeing, the stuff that's getting a lot of news are like commencement speeches and the students going nuts about AI and not agreeing with that future depiction of the world. And then the other one that is recent is this NextEra Dominion merger, right, or acquisition, and like how that's playing into the data center growth, what's driving a merger that is that large. I don't know. What are you thinking about that?
Well, yes. First, to just pause and say congratulations to the students, but also the parents of those students who are, seeing that college graduation and that at those commencement speeches. So, Dominion and NextEra, some of the press releases about that, certainly some of the analysis on it has really been pointing to Dominion is a hotbed for data center growth. Data centers, I like to say they care about two things, which is the price of power and the price of land. They also kind of care about data access, so how close they are to fiber. So Virginia is that famous data center alley, and for NextEra to step in and acquire that utility, still 12 to 18 months of regulators reviewing that before it's finalized. They're really pushing to get use the balance sheets of the largest energy the largest owner of renewable generation in NextEra, be creating the largest public energy U.S. energy acquisition that we've ever seen in the history of the U.S. So we're really kind of stepping into a scenario where I think data centers are looking at it's the capital markets, right? Do you have the balance sheet to get us the power we need. They found the land, they found the connection, and they're really just hoping for that generation to come online.
So I guess my question is, do you think this kind of merger helps create the supply we're going to need to meet this demand? I guess that's kind of like the big issue, right? Like, is it going to enable bigger development of generation resources to meet this kind of growth? Unknown?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're looking at, I still think there's a big supply chain bottleneck around transformers. And just the ability to get things constructed. My home state of Utah, they're talking about a 9 gigawatt data center that they want to put in. And there's obviously going to be some local opposition, which kind of a separate issue, right, on that. But just in terms of the plan to power 9 gigawatts, that's a 10 to 20 year ramp of let's get the pipelines built to get the gas in here. Let's get the power substations built. And so I think the larger capital, you can throw your weight around a little bit. And so I think on NextEra specifically, the largest generating from solar in the US, renewable generators. So they might have ways to bypass that a little bit. But if I'm an energy buyer, I'm looking to lock down my prices, especially if I'm in the data center space. I'm looking to lock down 15 years. But even if I'm in any other industry, right? We serve healthcare, we serve manufacturing, we serve education and real estates. There's at least some element of, do I add protection now? Maybe not 100%. Maybe there's a hedge there, depending on whether I'm my level of confidence. But I'm looking to add some of that protection over the next 2 years to just kind of see what happens. Are these data centers going to, again, go up into the right like we're seeing, or are we going to flatline a little bit?
Right. Yep. Does this all materialize? Yep.
Yeah. And I know, so Bill, I also want to talk about economic outlooks outside of just data centers, right? Take your pick. Bond markets, war in Iran. Where do you want to start?
That's where on my list, right, is, the war. Let's talk about, I've been thinking about it in 3 scenarios. Status quo, oil continues not to flow out of through the straits. Things get worse. There's a hot war, and things get better, and peace breaks out, and all of a sudden, we're back to normal, but not back to normal. Does this mean anything for buyers of gas, natural gas, and electricity in the business community in the U.S.? I mean, we've been fairly insulated from it so far, miraculously. But what are your thoughts?
Fair question. The real challenge with this war is to try to figure out what happens next. To your point about the 3 different scenarios, Israel is certainly a big voice kind of next to Trump, trying to, just today he was on the radio, Netanyahu saying, no, we want to keep attacking. We want to stop the ceasefire, right? The U.S. is lucky in that we are an exporter of natural gas. So if you're a buyer of natural gas in the U.S., you're seeing, we have enough supply domestically. We actually have high economic incentive to get as much gas out of the country as we can via LNG, so liquefied natural gas. So for those who are learning about energy markets, we have LNG price points in Europe called TTF, or the Tidal Transfer Facility in the Netherlands, and we have the JKM, the Japan-Korea marker, out in Asia. And we saw prices in TTF and JKM jump $5 an MMBTU around, from 10 to 15, pretty much within days of the war. And Henry Hub moved a penny or two. I mean, it just really, we kind of, Henry Hub just seemed to shrug it off. So with the exception of New England LNG, there's some winter kind of dependence on LNG up there. With the exception of that, we're really kind of surprisingly seeing LNG externally outside of the U.S. go up, and domestic markets staying a little bit insulated. I don't know. I mean, are you kind of surprised at that? I think it took.
I mean, it does. Counter to my economic brain of like that the markets have become more linked internationally due to LNG. But I think the quantities domestically are sufficient. And then we also talked last time about the Jones Act waiver and how that can even help the New England exception that you were just talking about. I don't know if you want to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the Jones Act is the kind of a century-old wartime protection to protect U.S. naval infrastructure, right? Any ship that sails from a U.S. port to a U.S. port must be manned by U.S. crew and owned by a U.S. company. And so what that means is an LNG tanker that's owned by an external foreign national cannot, or foreign country can't come, stop in Henry Hub, and bring it up to Boston without a Jones Act waiver. We do have a waiver right now through early autumn. So the Trump administration has done that to try to help fight some of the inflation. So coming back to our economic pieces here, right? If that were to continue through the winter, that's where you could really see $5 reduction, $5 per decatherm come off in the New England market. Just because that gas now doesn't have to go to Europe anymore. It's going up there.
Yeah, I'd like to think of it as it's like constructing a pipeline overnight from Henry Hub up to Boston, just by the stroke of a pen. And obviously the pricing will be factored in there, but it is one of these kind of policy changes where the impact is immediate.
Yeah, no, I mean, anything that you can kind of change with the stroke of a pen, right? There's, to your point of how fast the market responds, it really depends on the type of situation we're here. I actually see a question in the chat to just add to that of, what can the stroke of a pen do? Going back to the data center conversation about, is this load real? Is it going to arrive? Somebody's asking about the legislation passed and what does that do, right? So when looking at the regulatory environment, there's certain rules that PJM is considering around data centers, requiring them to be curtailable. And also on the kind of ERCOT side, they're worried that if the data centers turn off too fast, the grid might fall apart. So there's rules there.
Yes, reliability, stability concerns on the grid. That was very interesting. NERC alert, I think, that came out.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting, I think, balance there that the grid is just trying to navigate of, how can we do that? Another regulatory idea jumps to mind. Do you want to talk about RGGI next?
Yeah, let's talk about the changes to RGGI. Well, first, tell us what RGGI is, just so we don't do the acronym soup and we lose half the audience that may not be familiar with it.
Fair enough. Yes, I can be guilty of that. So RGGI is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It is the New England carbon, you can call it a carbon price, carbon tax. It's a cap and trade system where it's 11 states now, with Maine down to Virginia, states that are putting a price on the carbon emissions from the power sector. And so we saw Virginia announce in April that they were going to join. Not enough credits out there, and pricing goes up, $10 a megawatt hour. Just to your point, stroke of a pen, right? We're seeing this over 2 weeks. Announcement to price kind of hitting that ceiling. As an energy buyer, how do you navigate these kind of regulatory changes, right? What are you looking at to try to protect yourself?
Yeah, I think that's the question when we're always talking about with our customers, not just the regulatory change, but it's also, what's their individual company's tolerance for risk? These kind of changes can move in your favor or against you. So, I think that you have to look at this from a balanced view, and this is what we try and do, is advise our clients on what is your tolerance around things like your budget for the year, right? And if you're a nonprofit and your focus is on healthcare delivery, you might have zero tolerance for energy utilities, right? In terms of variance from your budget, and that's where hopefully this kind of information and your energy advisors like us are providing you updates and talking about these risks and talking about ways to protect you from those risks. And there's lots of options. I don't know if you want to get into that now, or we want to keep down the policy discussion.
The one thing I want to call out of if I'm a listener listening in to say, the regulatory, it seems like you said something to push it up and down, right? And I'm finding that assumption. Wait a minute, regulatory is good for me. So if you're a listener, if you're in a state with there are incentive programs. If you're in a state with any sort of community solar program, if you're in a state with efficiency upgrade incentives, alternative energy credits, there are things that you can do to pull that back. Interestingly, the Dominion NextEra announcement, they were very sensitive to this data center public relations concern. There's over $2 billion of bill credits tucked into that deal to say, we're going to try to bring this cost relief to consumers because people are sensitive to it. So, yes, regulatory change is always on the table. It does have a both sides thing. And I think to Bill's point, that's part of what we try to navigate with our clients is to say, let's look at how we can take advantage of the local incentives to improve or offset some of your spend increases elsewhere.
Or permanently change the way you use energy, right? Looking at energy efficiency projects or fuel switching or equipment switching, where your load profile, your total consumptions change forever. So That's definitely part of the mix, especially when we looked at going back to that first chart of the demand just going up and up and up forever. If we're truly in this rising price regime and there's not relief in sight due to that challenging demand growth, we want to make sure we put all options on the table for people that we're talking to about what are your choices to deal with it in the short term, the medium term, the long term. How can we stay on top of incentive programs, all of those kinds of services. And if you're not talking to us, you should be talking to somebody, right? So obviously we have a preference here. But,
Agreed. And last point I want to make on the regulatory changes before we leave the topic. I see a comment here of, again, referring back to that previous chart of, around 2000 to 2020, we saw a flat electricity load growth. What's interesting to me is energy markets really came of age in these late 90s. And so we are in this scenario where energy markets were built and have continued to be built and continued to operate in these flat energy conditions. And we saw, was the CEO of AEP, I think a couple weeks ago, essentially, shooting across the bow of PJM to say, look, you were good when the markets were flat. When the markets are going up, we might need to consider looking at MISO, I think was it might have been SPP, but essentially, really reevaluating their options. And we're seeing even states like Maryland and different governors come out and say, if the market doesn't work for us, then we will force change on you one way or the other. I don't think we're there yet, but it's certainly an interesting challenge to watch.
It's true. The market has to prove that it's working well to satisfy all the players, right? To justify the rule set and the way it's structured.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to LNG exports, and we alluded briefly to the war in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. So the Strait of Hormuz controls 20% of all global LNG traffic. So when that's closed, essentially 20% of the LNG supply is not available. Qatar, in the middle of the bombings, represented that with the destruction that they were experiencing in their facilities, almost 3% of global supply is shut down for 5 years. I mean, whether the strait opens up immediately or not, they think that's coming. At the same time, Golden Pass comes out. They open their new export terminal late last month. I'm losing track of time, but within the last quarter, right? They've announced that they're fully operational. For those interested, the feed gas started flowing into the terminal in January. The first official cargo is the announcement. I sometimes lose track of time of, but that's going to add 1% to our global, right? So we're seeing 3% drop from Qatar. We're seeing a 1% boost in global LNG exports. This has been a long fundamental driver of natural gas supply. It's almost 10 years now since we started exporting LNG. What are your thoughts on where that's going?
Well, it seems like our linkage again to the global market is kind of capacity constrained. Even with more trains coming online, it's still not moving the needle for our domestic pricing. And if it does, as more trains come online, I have a lot of faith in the domestic gas production. Like they've kind of proven themselves over, the fracking revolution in the last 20 years. If the prices are right, they can turn on the spigot, and if they're not, they'll turn it off. So the response of production may be lagged, but it seems like there's plenty of capability there to respond to the market, at least over a longer period of time, which I would put in quarters or a year, not like many years. I don't know. What do you? I'm not a production expert in gas, but just kind of like witnessing it as being an electric power guy for so long. I'm like, when the gas prices go up, the spigot opens up.
Yeah, we've absolutely seen that, right? So interestingly, even with the concern and the turmoil in Iran and global LNG, and even with the economic concerns we've had with inflation and others, natural gas pricing has been pretty low over the last month or two. And so we're starting to see producers respond.
Go down, right?
Yeah, prices are down, right? We're down fairly significantly over the last couple months here. So we're starting to see suppliers actually turn the spigot the other way to say, hey, we're going to keep that gas in the ground. There's the industry used to have this DUC data drilled but uncompleted. So the uncompleted was the U and the C of the DUC. But you could talk about the DUC data, and the EIA stopped producing that actually recently because so many wells would hit this intermediate undefined where it was drilled, completed, but not turned on. And so they just kind of threw up their hands and said, we're not going to look at that data anymore. But to your point, producers are absolutely ready to respond up or down. And I think that there's 40 plus years of natural gas in North America available at less than $4 a decatherm from a production standpoint. So I think we're ready to go. I think it's just a question of, if you see these kind of dips like we're seeing now, does that create an opportunity, right, for buyers to act on? And all the infrastructure to support the LNG is absolutely moving things up and down. We saw Freeport a number of years ago go offline and just crater gas prices just because they had a small hiccup in their operations. Mm-hmm. We're seeing gas pipelines get built to dump that gas into the Gulf Coast region. Those LNG export terminals better be ready to take it.
Well, I mean, from a buyer's perspective, I'm hearing power might be pretty tough. Gas is feeling pretty good, right? In my oversimplified conclusion, right?
I think if I'm an energy buyer, right, I'm looking at kind of aligned to say, I'm happy about buying gas, and frankly, we've got some healthcare systems who stability is so important to them and cost year-over-year reduction. They're looking at a 10-year hedge, right? I mean, I was talking about that last quarter with somebody to, they're trying to get board approval and different industries move at different timescales, but we're working through that process with them to say, they're usually in that 3 to 5 year range. They're looking at the forward curve that's flat, that they can beat $4, and they're saying, we want a piece of that out until 2035. Right.
So what else do we have on for our topics today? I mean, we covered a lot here in a few minutes, so hopefully covering the basics and the fundamentals.
I think we're doing a good job. I think the last one I want to point to is just kind of continuing the geopolitical framework here. We've got UAE leaving OPEC. So the OPEC is the international group. I don't even remember what it stands for, but it might even be French. Sometimes you run into international acronyms and they aren't in English, but it's the international group of oil producers, of which the U.S. does not operate, but they are a cartel, and so they will raise or lower production based on prices. So think Saudi Arabia, Venezuela is a part of that, and other countries in the Middle East. With OPEC leaving, right, a big part of what they're trying to do is signal alliance to the U.S., but it also creates the potential for more and more supply to rush in. Is that a news item that you thought was remarkable, or did it kind of fly too far under the radar to mean anything right now?
No, I think it's very significant politically in terms of energy markets. It's kind of hard to say. It's definitely more petroleum than electricity and gas that we play in. So, I think you're right. I mean, any breakup of the cartel and having more independent producers responding to global prices, to me, is a more effective market, right? And it usually benefits consumers, right? If you've got pricing that's not pushed by your suppliers, but it's actually through a balance of supply and demand, it can't be bad news, Ben. That's how I look at it.
I hear so much of the energy deregulation in your comments, right?
I'm a believer, right? Markets are brutally efficient in resources. They're not great for everything, but for what we do for a living, they're very efficient mechanisms. So the better the market structure, the more competitive. From a buyer's perspective, that tends to be a good news event.
Yeah, and I've had a colleague ping me of the OPEC as the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. So yep. Thanks to those for jumping in on that. The other reason I wanted to bring up OPEC and UAE here was we talk about oil, and we help our clients buy electricity and natural gas. So I think oil is a useful indicator more as a general economic bellwether, right? Are we looking at oil? At some point, oil gets to the pricing level where we get real nervous from an economy perspective. I've seen the line in the sand of $150 a barrel creates the recession risk. What happens to energy markets if we do I know it's a scary R word to consider. Yeah. What happens when we hit that?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely, it's definitely the kind of case where economic activity slows down, right? It becomes, people start reevaluating their commutes and their jobs and all sorts of things that you wouldn't normally call into question. The input to so many goods that require a lot of transportation is going to be off the charts. So you have all these inflationary pressures. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go there.
Who's bought an airline ticket recently and been surprised by the sticker shock, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's kind of crazy. I throw it out as the last kind of parting comment here, just to say that if we are looking at oil hitting these ceilings, generally recessions tend to be bearish for demand, and so I think as an advisor to an energy buyer, I always want to have that balanced picture of, well, our price is up. Should I be buying now? Could they go down? Could they go up? They can always go both directions, right? The forward market really is that balance between those two competing factors of, data centers are pulling us up, but then could a recession drag us down, right? And so there's always this kind of push-pull experience that markets are going through every day. So it's certainly an interesting challenge. So let's kind of, last words here, kind of last minute takeaway. Thanks to everyone for jumping into the chat. We appreciate you guys participating there. But if you've got 60 seconds, one sentence to sum up kind of where we're at, if you're an energy buyer, what are your thoughts there?
I would say don't be too scared to act and seek out the advice you need. Like I said, that's what we do. Talk through these bigger forces in play in terms of the markets and your individual company's needs and risks, appetite, and sensitivity. So like seek out expertise to make these decisions, but don't wait necessarily to act because you're hoping things will get better. That's kind of when we talk every week about the feedback from our clients as a team. And one of the things that we heard this Monday, and that was that some clients are waiting close to their contract expiration dates. And I think that's in hopes that things will get better before they act, but that's not always the optimal strategy for the company. So we encourage you to reach out, seek that advice, and we'll help guide those kind of decisions and give you your options. I think that's probably the one thing that we can clearly say we offer.
Yeah. I think to jump off that a little bit, the forward markets exist. So you can look at what your budget looks like now for 27, 28, 29. And if you're in a position where you can make your business work at those energy budgets, it's at least worth some sort of a hedge to protect yourself. So to your point, knowing where you stand, you can always know where you stand, and reaching out to anyone who's got that energy market data to help you navigate that decision, get those contracts in place so you're prepared to act if you do need to, if those opportunities arise. There's no reason to wait. So great. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate you joining me. Fun as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. This is a lot of fun.
And for those who are attending in the live in the chat, thanks again for participating. We will be doing these regularly, so check in around for our next one. There's plenty of things to talk about, and so please come with your questions. We'll come with our ideas, and look forward to seeing you then.